The earthquake and tsunami in Japan is a tragedy of biblical proportions. But are officials here in the United States having a hysterical knee-jerk reaction to this disaster, starting with a sudden effort to block U.S. nuclear reactors in areas in America where earthquakes rarely, if ever, occur? It seems politicians everywhere are channeling Rahm Emanuel by taking advantage of the crisis. Here to discuss our Fox Business anchor and countdown to the closing bell, and my colleague Liz Clayman, Suffolk University economics professor Benjamin Powell, and radio host and Freedom Watch regular Nancy Skinner. Nancy, to you first. Does it make sense for someone like Congressman John Markey from Massachusetts, independent Democrat Joe Lieberman from Connecticut to say, we got to stop building all the nuclear reactors here, even if they're nowhere near the ocean, even if they're nowhere near a tectonic plate, even if they're nowhere near anywhere where a natural disaster could occur?
Yes, and they should have done it well before this happened in Japan, because this is an earthquake and tsunami, but these nuclear facilities, Judge, and I have always said this, terrorist attacks, the regulators who go in and try and penetrate these have huge success rates, getting in, criminal background checks. There are so many things that
Nancy,
can go wrong with nuclear.
I want you to talk to me about whether the tragedy in Japan is a sufficient basis for the government of the United States to exercise its authority to prevent private owners of these already licensed and approved nuclear plants in America from operating them.
Yes. Absolutely. The government has a responsibility to make sure hundreds of thousands of people don't die in a core meltdown. And this is what happens when you have nuclear reactors and things go wrong, Judge. When we have alternatives like renewable energy that does not have these consequences nor the cost,
Liz,
that's exactly the job of government.
The issue is the knee-jerk reaction by the government. Tragedy, reaction. Tragedy, reaction. No thought, no concern about private property, no concern about the Constitution. Just, oh, something happened over there. We got to make sure it can't happen here.
Well, let's be clear. As I understand it, Senator Lieberman said, let's put a moratorium on new plants. Now, there are 20 permits pending. These things take years to go ahead. But no, you don't just stop everything and become hysterical. You do look sincerely closely at whether they can withstand certain earthquakes. There are two in California. I'm from California, the San Onofre, and this is the Diablo Canyon. You got to make sure that they can withstand massive earthquakes. And at this point, the Japanese, who are very stringent when it comes to regulations, they did tests, but it's not that the earthquakes hurt these things. It was the following tsunami. So we have to look at this and say, don't have dramatically knee-jerk and hysterical reactions.
Ben Powell, you're a professor of economics. Disabuse people watching us now of the notion that when there's a broken window, it actually helps the economy to repair the broken window. Magnify that a zillion times. When Japan is broken, it helps the American economy to rebuild Japan.
It sounds like a straw man, Judge, but unfortunately there's somebody somewhere who's saying Japan's had a sluggish economy for 20 years. They need more investment. Look, this tsunami hit, and now they need to make massive new investment to repair, so this is good for their economy. It's insane. Bastiat blew this up, the French economist in the 19th century, more than 150 years ago, when he described exactly this broken window fallacy. So when the tsunami hits, Japan got poorer. It lost real resources and lives. No amount of rebuilding after that is making their economy better. You're just replacing what you already lost to get back to where you were.
And what kind of argument would you make to Congressman Markey or to Senator Lieberman, Professor Powell, who want to change American law and the ability of private property owners to use their private property in America because of what happened in Japan last week?
For the vast majority of proposed nuclear sites and existing nuclear sites, what happened in Japan has nothing to do with any of the potential problems that they could have here. So it's not a cause for any new laws on that.
Nancy Skinner, do you expect that the government would actually shut down nuclear plants that are operating well and safely, or just as Liz pointed out, slow down the process for authorizing new ones?
Well, like the German Chancellor Merkel has said, as a result, we're going to go to renewables and phase out nuclear. So I wouldn't shut down a nuclear. We can't shut down nuclear power plants because they're providing a certain percentage. But the idea that this is our future is insane. There are alternatives. And you know what, Liz, it's not just about earthquakes. There's floods. There's tornadoes. There's terrorism. The drills that circumvent and shut down power have been always proven to.
And Nancy, I know, I love you, but if you triangulate it, it may be a little bit of a stretch, but How many people have died in car accidents that were using crude oil? You're not going to shut down cars that are using crude oil. I know it's a stretch, but seriously,
that's
to
a
just
big
stop.
stretch.
But nuclear
huge
is a cleaner energy.
All right. I was going to make the argument, Nancy, that maybe we should get rid of kitchen knives because every once in a while somebody stabs somebody else.
Now that's a threat.
Liz made it as well. All right, so we're going to switch gears now.
Nuclear knives and nuclear power plants.
All right, Nancy, you're a good sport when we gang up on you. We're going to switch gears. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell predicts that all 47 Republican senators will vote against raising the debt ceiling. But just last week, House GOP Speaker John Boehner said if Congress doesn't raise the debt limit, the economy would be sent into a tailspin. These opposing statements, what do you think about them, Nancy Skinner? What should a good Democrat do? Let Tim Geithner borrow all the money he wants? Or try and curtail the size and scope of government as the people obviously prefer?
I do think we should curtail spending, but not, and here's my analogy, this is like the GOP senators holding up the firemen from putting water on the melting nuclear reactor. A default of the U.S. government debt is unprecedented, and it's against the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, Judge, that says the United States government debt is always valid. So we can't say to our creditors, hey, you're just going to have to wait and see if we get the squabble all worked out. You can't say that.
Got it. Ben Powell, no one is suggesting that the creditors not be paid. In fact, Senator Pat Toomey, himself an economist like you, demonstrated in a full-page article in the Wall Street Journal that the government can pay its debts and operate the government without borrowing any more money. It just has to start doing something that Nancy and her fellow Democrats couldn't bring themselves to even imagine, which is spend less. Spend less than we take in tax and revenue collection.
Yeah, not raising the debt ceiling doesn't mean that we have to default. You do it by cutting spending. But just to take a little bit of a more radical position here, Judge, what's so bad about defaulting necessarily? So ultimately, the government, if this debt keeps piling up, something's going to happen. And if it's going to be increased taxes or inflation, I think a default might actually be better than that. It would do a mess to financial markets quickly, but you wouldn't have the long-term inflation problems or the crippling tax rates. And as a bonus, that would be a more credible commitment that Uncle Sam won't get to do it in the future, because now creditors will be more reluctant to lend to him in the future.
What would the
That's
Wall
a long-term
Street,
benefit.
folks that you interview and you use as sources and you mingle with say to Professor Powell's argument?
Well, Judge...
And they love corporate welfare. We know that from Gasparino's book.
Whether it's Wall Street or Republicans from when George Bush was president, they would say raise the debt limit. Mitch McConnell, this is hypocrisy at its finest. Mitch McConnell voted twice, 2002 and 2008, to raise the debt ceiling. But what, since George Bush, a Republican, was in charge, it's okay? I mean, come on, you've got to look at exactly what this is. You don't let the nation default no matter who's in charge.
Nancy Skinner, Barack Obama himself voted against raising the debt limit for very sound economic 101 arguments when he was a senator from Chicago and George Bush was in the White House. Now that he's in the White House, he wants to be able to borrow and spend all he can. He borrowed $223 billion in just last month. It was the most borrowed in any month in American history. Isn't that making matters worse?
Well, you know what? Now he's president. I disagree that against his vote, if he voted that way. But look, he has a plan for a long-term deficit reduction, and that's what both sides need to come together and do to assure the markets. But to your professor's point, that it wouldn't matter if we defaulted, you know, so then you would say that all rating agencies would have to say that federal securities are non-performing. So the repercussions of dollars flowing to euros, what would happen to our economy, having to be charged exorbitant interest rates just to cover what we have is catastrophic. And the idea should not even be entertained.
All right, it should be entertained because all ideas should be entertained because this is Freedom Watch where freedom of speech reigns. Nancy Skinner, Ben Powell, Liz Klayman, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Coming